Hi everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Brief. If you've not joined us today, this is our podcast where we unpack everything to do with branding. And today on the show, I'm thrilled to have a really special guest who's going to help me unpack the topic of the power of words. And Konrad, welcome today. Konrad is from the Creative Copywriter, CEO. Thank you so much for joining us today, Konrad. I really appreciate it. And I've dragged you out on a super, super cold day as well, a week before Christmas. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Pleasure.
Very looking forward to unpacking things.
We will
talking
indeed.
about words. As you know, I am the
That's
words
what you
man.
do,
That's what I'm all about.
Mr. Word Science.
Exactly.
For the benefit of the audience today, it'd be super helpful just if you, in your own words, just give a little bit of an overview of the Creative Copywriter. Just briefly tell us about the agency.
Yeah.
Start there and then, we'll go on.
Briefly, I might struggle with that part. I'll give you the spiel to start with. So,
elevator pitch, go.
Yeah. So we blend the science of data-steered strategy and psychology with the art of creative copywriting, basically to help brands get their words right at every step of the customer journey.
Love it. That is a proper elevator pitch, like the nuanced words.
There you go. Chiseled, delivered multiple times a week.
So I'm really interested to know how you began the journey quickly as well.
Yeah.
So how did it begin?
Right. I'm going to try and condense it. Right. So where do I start? It was 1984, a hot summer's day. I left uni. I studied philosophy at uni, which is kind of one of those subjects which helps you with everything and nothing all at once. Went to Australia, and that's where I just fell into some sales jobs.
Yeah. Actually,
charity fundraising. So I was one of those people on the streets stopping you and persuading you to sign onto a subscription and give to charity. The good thing about that job, and the reason why it's relevant to this, is that I learned quite a lot about sales psychology. So they were quite good at training every morning, which would later be used like on paper, in a sense, with copywriting, which I hadn't discovered at that point. Traveled around Australia, met my now wife, who's the managing director of the agency, Nitsan. There, we traveled together. I basically ended up going to her home country, living there for 6 months without a visa because I had to apply, and I was living in her parents' house. And that's when I stumbled upon the art and science of copywriting, just because I wanted to make some money online. And I was like doing some courses. I studied both copywriting and SEO, which very powerful combination, because SEO is really about taking kind of like a demand-led approach to marketing and building a business. So the reason we're called the Creative Copywriter, which ironically is not a very creative name for a copywriting agency, is because I found a gap in the market. I found that there's quite a lot of monthly search traffic for creative copywriting.
Right. Sort of opportunity.
Yeah. And back then it was good to kind of use the keyword in your domain name. And so it kind of fell into the brand name.
Is, to a degree.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's what it says on the tin. So we kind of always set ourselves up in a good place from the get-go, because we've always been on page one of Google for creative copywriting, now for copywriting agency. And at some point, so that was around 2013, like officially started the company in 2014. That's when we became a limited company, basically an agency. I started by blogging about creative copywriting and doing SEO best practices, was a freelancer. Then I kind of was hungry for more. I didn't really know what an agency was at the point. I hadn't come from an agency background. I was just trying to like problem solve and go, what do I do next? And I wanted to grow my portfolio, have a better portfolio for the traffic that was coming to the website. So I kind of reached out to freelancers and said, why don't we all kind of pull our portfolios together? Freelancers that had more experience than me. And essentially I called it a collective, but it was the beginnings of an agency.
But there's no specific goal to become an agency. No. It sounds like it happened quite organically.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it was just, what do I do next? How do I kind of grow this? And I think because I was freelancing as a copywriter, but I was always more entrepreneurial. I liked the marketing side. I liked the SEO side. I liked bringing in business. And that's why I sort of pulled these freelancers in, said, you know what, I'll farm out work to you. I'll take a cut. and we'll call ourselves a collective, and then basically kind of morphed into an agency. I understood what an agency was at some point. A very key milestone on this journey, which I must mention, is when Nitsan, who I mentioned previously in the story, joined in 2017. And she is very much the yin to my yang. We've got very different brains, different personalities. So I'm if you know the kind of EOS system, I'm very much the visionary. She's the integrator. So she's like an ops person, operational mind. I'm like ADHD, going off on tangents, creative, like many agency founders, I'd say. And I think the combination was very, very powerful, because again, in order for us to like, she believes that's when we really started the agency. For her, 2017 was the beginning of TCC.
Strangely familiar because, as you know, Sarah and I worked together. Yeah. And again, you know, the foundation of the two of us actually coming to work together really was where our journey kind of properly began as well. Yeah. There's a lot of similarities there, but it was never a goal. I don't know. Did you ever set out to work together when you first got together?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And I bet you the first question everybody always asks you is, what's it like to work with your wife? How do you do that? Yeah. We get that at least 10 times a day from different people. Do you find that a lot?
Would you like me to answer that question?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, genuinely. I'm interested to know if it's just us that's always asked that question.
It's incredible. It's very rewarding. Look, the first month, let's say a couple of months, were tough. When she joined the agency, we call, prior to Nitsan joining it, we call it the Wild West of the creative copywriter. She joined in the first week. She was like, babe, why is it so chaotic? You know, we were going around and doing a lot of firefighting. Yeah. And I just said, you know, like, babe, that's just agency life. That's just how it is. And there's an element of truth in what I was saying, but a large part of it was because we didn't have processes. We didn't have that. And then we discovered EOS and Get a Grip, the book. There's a few books in that collection where they basically talk about the idea of having a visionary and an integrator and building structure around the business. And when we read that together, we were like, oh, there's room for both of us. And actually it's very powerful to have both of us together. And we kind of like understood our lanes and then sort of stuck to them. And we have our areas of responsibility that we know who's in charge and why. And we've grown together. And I think I got really, really lucky that she joined because I didn't have an integrator, right? And it's hard to hire someone at that stage of being a very small agency. You don't really have the money to hire someone to be that senior and that committed, you know, as you are. And especially I got lucky that she just has a different skill set to me and that they kind of complement each other once you know how they should, you know, how to sort of merge them together and how to kind of stick to your lanes and play to your strengths.
Yeah, 100%. So, and I love what you just said there. It sounds like you've also been influenced by the power of words as well. So reading those books, that's given you some direction, some structure. So that's come to your aid in building your agency.
Absolutely. It's all about words. Where would we be without words?
Which takes us on nicely.
Lovely segue.
Do you like that?
Excellent.
Which is that we better start talking about words because that is the reason we're here. So as an agency for us, we're on the brand side, as you know. And for people watching, Konrad and I, or New Creative and the Creative Copywriter, have worked together. Not only have you helped us develop our copy for our own website, which was beautifully executed, by the way, you've also helped us with a number of different client projects as well, where you've come in to help do the copy piece. So we always talk about brand, and people often naturally go to what it looks like. But we always talk about brand being how you look, feel, and sound. And that sound piece, for me, is often a huge afterthought. Yeah. It's the thing people put the least emphasis on, but it can be the thing that really makes the biggest difference. So I want to talk about wording really being a bit of a kind of superpower for brands, because I feel like it's massively untapped a lot of the time, not enough focus on it, often not taken seriously enough. We'll get into AI and what chaos that's thrown into the mix as well in a little while. But from your perspective, running a copywriting agency, you know, I really just want to know kind of your perspective on that role that copy and words is playing in brand, the power it has, and your take on, you know, what that can deliver for a business.
Great question. And yes, it's very sad and tragic that it is often an afterthought. And my job is often going around talking about how important it is. Yeah. When it comes to brand, I think let's make this a little bit Christmassy because of even the most, I'd say that even the most sort of visually stunning brand, without good copy, without powerful copy, without strategic copy, can end up being a bit like a, you know, beautifully wrapped gift, but with nothing inside. Nothing inside. And so,
an empty box.
An empty box. There you go. Beautifully wrapped, there's nothing there. So copy, you know, what does it do when it comes to brand? It's kind of it gives your brand personality. It gives it relatability. It gives it depth.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, even to go a bit further, it's almost like what we're doing is maybe going a bit too far. It's the soul. We were sculpting the soul of the brand, you know, and it's almost like the handshake or the story that you're telling. You know, able to tell a story that people fall in love with, and it's the nudge, it's the conversion piece. You know, there's so many elements to copy beyond brand, but are all intertwined, because, you know, when you're writing copy for any sort of brand touch point, you're there to build loyalty and trust, all the things that we aim to do with branding. Yeah. But usually you're aiming to do more as well. And it might be, you know, usually it's try and move them to action, convert. Exactly. So I think that when we talk about copy when it comes to brand messaging, I always, or for whatever sort of purpose, I don't think we should necessarily pull the brand piece away from those other pieces, and
they have to work together, don't
they?
Yeah.
It's a balancing act, and I think you know about our 13 lenses. I like to bang on about it. I will, I'm sure, allude to some of them within this conversation. And you know, our 13 lenses is a framework we developed, which it looks at copy through these different lenses, like 13 different ingredients in the like secret sauce of copy that compels, convinces, and converts. And there's a brand lens, right? So that's one of them.
Yeah.
Really, really important one. But we also have an action lens, you know, an SEO lens and other lenses, goldfish lens. I won't talk about all of them. I'm sure we don't have time. But I think the important thing is it's kind of like that balancing act. So I think I sort of answered your question, and then I started delving into other areas.
So one of the things I've like really admired from a distance looking at you guys is this sort of conversion piece where, and I'm probably not going to use the words you would use at all, so forgive me, but there's almost this sort of like art meets science piece.
Yeah.
Because I think you spoke about the word creative copywriter, and, you know, clearly people are Googling that, and, you know, it's doing great for SEO. So people have this sense of words being quite a creative and artistic, what's the word I'm looking for? You know,
endeavor
exactly. You know, but what I love is where you're really applying what feels like real science into the mix as well, and finding sort of some, you know, perfect point where those two things can converge to really deliver results. So I'm going to ask a huge question now. How on earth did those two things come about that made you able to kind of bring that artistic perspective and the creativity that words need, but also come at it from, you know, what feels like quite a sort of scientific angle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure if I have answered that specific question before. So it's a good one, because like, where did it come from?
Yeah.
As you said, I think it's usually considered an art in a sense, like more artistic. It's creativity, creative 100%. Copywriting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where my love for like that intersection between the two came from, because I think that, I guess when I started out, the story I told you about, you know, it was me just writing copy according to things I'd learned and trying to be creative. And then somewhere along the line, I developed and I'm trying to pinpoint exactly how or what happened, what changed what was it? In my life. Something fell on my head, an apple, and suddenly, I don't know how or where. Maybe it's just learning things about business and picking up, you borrow things from other agencies, from other experts. I think that's something I've always been quite good at, is seeing something and going, I see the value in that, and almost like reverse engineering it or kind of borrowing it.
Yeah.
And I think this might be answering the question. I think I've seen a lot of agents, I'm going to go off on a tangent and try and bring it back round. I've seen a lot of people in business, in agencies, kind of read books, right? Business books and stuff, and talk about it on LinkedIn this one, that one, and that one. And then I know them and I know their agency, and I'm like, what are you applying? Like, what are you actually applying from it? Like, it's just a fleeting sort of, oh, that's a good idea, and then it's forgotten about. Whereas I have this thing where I really struggle with books, because I write so many notes, I'll read like the first chapter or a few pages and go, that's how we can apply it. And then, so looping back, I think I've picked things out where I'm like, I guess I've probably seen a scientific approach to marketing elsewhere, and then wanted to kind of take that into our world. And I love, off the back of that, I've like fallen in love with, and my team kind of laugh at me about this, I've fallen in love with like a scoring matrix. So our 13 lenses is not just a methodology with these 13 ingredients. Each ingredient is broken down into a list of like almost like action points, like things like, have you done this, yes or no? So a scoring matrix, fancy way of saying a checklist. So a scoring matrix, a traffic light system, I love that too, and a Venn diagram. I'm obsessed with Venn diagrams. So when you started going, the intersection...
You're like, you pictured it in your head, you're like,
right in the middle there. The value it brings is, I think it allows you to kind of contain that creativity. It gives like guardrails. It gives you like direction and more purpose and more kind of quality assurance, like something to check back, more objectivity. I think that's the key. And especially when in our industry, like sadly, as you said, copywriting is a bit of an afterthought. And sadly, again, even when we're working with marketing people who appreciate the value of it, which is almost all of them, that's why we're working with them. Otherwise, why pay us for our services? What happens often is we'll write the copy, we'll create the copy, and then people within other stakeholders within the company, they come in and they sort of go, well, that's not how I'd write it. Or have you seen our competitors don't say that? We need to put that jargon back in. Because especially in the B2B space, as you know, it's like
everyone sounds the same.
They're copying each other because they think that's how you should sound. They don't understand best practices of copywriting. But when we're coming with like a more like objective scientific framework, like the 13 lenses, or with branding, we have a mini checklist called Mural. So making sure that everything we create is meaningful, unique, relevant, authentic, long lasting. First of all, you're getting them to buy into that. And they often like the fact that it's more scientific. And arguably there's more objectivity there. So it gives us more leeway to sort of go, push back and go, hang on, these stakeholders, Tom, Dick or Harry coming in and thinking that they know what's best, trust the process.
It becomes a tool for you as a team to actually, it's a part of your toolkit to say to a client, this is why. It's like evidence-led piece, which is like research would be, or data and insight would be.
Exactly.
You can say this is why it's going to work. This is why we're doing it. It's not just artistic and creative. It actually has foundations in another place. And
that doesn't always work, but it gives us a better foot forward, or whatever the expression is. And I'll just add one thing because it's popped into my mind. Actually, there is something I remember specifically regarding the 13 lenses. This was growing the agency. I remember basically at a certain point, obviously years ago, I can't look at all the copy we're sending over to clients. Right. And then I was trying to put a case study together for a new prospect, and I went to dive into recent samples for one of our clients. Read one of our blog posts. It was brilliantly written, but there were no subheaders. And I said, hang on, there's no subheaders. People skim and scan. I just know that. People skim and scan, so they consume content in different ways. And I thought, we've let that slip through, right? Because there hasn't been a QA process to stop that. And the writer maybe just forgot that that's a good best practice. And because I guess it's being a perfectionist sort of led to this, I was like, there must be a better way, right? I don't want to be giving stuff to clients that I feel bad about, that it's not ticking all the boxes. Yeah. And then the idea of ticking all the boxes kind of lent itself to a checklist and creating things like the 13 lenses.
Yeah.
So it's quality and me being obsessed with it and me just feeling emotionally damaged if we're not doing the right thing for the client in a way.
So that was going to be something else actually, was obviously, it's not just you. You've got a whole team now. You've brought other people in to execute the work you do in a particular way. You know what works. You've created all these methodologies. And going back to our point about writers often being creative and artistic, how do you go about, I suppose, teaching? It must be an education piece, that science element that you've developed. That in itself, has that become sort of part of your onboarding process? It's now part of the training that you can deliver to people to make sure that you're getting consistency in the work.
Absolutely, yeah. So like the 13 lenses, which I keep banging on about because it's one of our main frameworks that we're very proud of. It's kind of it's built into the training for all of our copywriters. All our copywriters are trained on it, and then it's baked into our briefs as well.
Yeah,
this is we are hybrid agency, so we've got internal writers and we've also got trusted contractors and freelancers, but they also have to adhere to this kind of methodology.
Yeah.
So we baked into our briefs as well. So training, briefs, and then we've got a QA process. So whenever we deliver copy to a client, we have the main copywriter writing it, and then it moves over to a QA copywriter that can fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and go through the checklist. Did we tick all those boxes?
Yeah.
So it's built into onboarding, into the process, and everywhere. And we talk about it a lot as well. I probably talk about it a bit too much. We're probably quite sick of it, to be honest.
I love it. So is there a brand at the minute that, and don't choose one that you've worked on yourself, is there a brand at the moment that you really admire what they're doing with their copy? Or is that an impossible question?
No.
It's
not. It's probably a good question. Our brand, obviously. No, look, obvious kind of go-to B2C choices are kind of Oatly and Innocent. I mean, but I think we talk about them a lot. I think one that's stuck out for me is Monzo as a as a obviously fintech B2C. I think they've got, and I mentioned balance being such an important thing when it comes to copy and brand messaging. I think they've really struck a beautiful balance between making their copy personal, conversational, and light, but without being flippant. Without being like overly quirky. Because at the end of the day, it's finance, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be, they're so much more human than the traditional kind of fintech brands. And I think even in their sort of, app notifications, they say things like, running out of money, time to, I can't think of specific examples, but they, even in their T's and C's, they say like, this is the boring part, but we've tried to make it as clear as possible. So, those human conversational elements, balancing it with clarity, not being flippant, and utilizing every possible touch point, like an app notification, like a T's and C's in the contract. To almost
really well thought out in terms of where the touch points are with the customer, how they can engage, how they can be authentic.
So they kind of turn like what would otherwise be quite transactional moments into sort of opportunities to build trust and loyalty and reinforce that loyalty. And
that's a really interesting area, I think. Do you see those moments, those touch points as just something that's totally untapped, like just not thought about? People aren't thinking about the consistency of the brand message at those little nuanced points, and it's just, forgotten.
Yeah, very often so, which is actually why, am I allowed to plug our podcast?
Of course.
Which is why we've started a podcast called Funnel Visionaries, real talk on perfecting the customer journey. And it's really about thinking that through. It's not just like our website, or this one 2-dimensional sort of shop window. I think that many companies don't think all the way through. And for us, customer journey, it goes beyond what marketers usually think about, top funnel, mid funnel. What about what's happening at the sale point? What's happening with current customers? How are we maximizing customer lifetime value and reducing churn, increasing retention?
It's exactly what we do. And we talk about brand experience and the consistency of brand experience at all touch points as well. So it's the same thing, isn't it? Whether it's a visual, whether it's words, there's all those untapped opportunities to ensure that you're showing up in the same way consistently for your customers.
Can I add one point on that?
Yeah, go.
So one little example that we've done. So I like to say brand harder. It's one of my hashtags in LinkedIn.
Love that.
Brand harder. That's why I wear the hat and like religiously. New hat though, as you know. So new one to 2025. We've done things even for ourselves, like our 404 page on the website. That's got a picture of me like shaking my fist, and these little touch points that you might not think about. The thank you page, like every little bit helps.
Yeah. So you talked there about Monzo and the human element, which brings me on quite nicely to the polar opposite of human, and we can't get away without talking about AI at the moment, because I imagine it's probably impacting your agency sector more than most.
Yeah,
we're seeing it hugely as a creative agency. And we could do a whole podcast about this. So we've got to be really careful.
I've got to try not to.
So where's the impact for you? I imagine that you're embracing it as a tool, as an agency. So it's probably changing how you work.
Yes.
But what impact? And I know AI hasn't suddenly popped up in the last 2 weeks, but obviously it's getting spoken about a lot at the moment.
Yeah. I'll try to be quick. I think that basically we jumped into embracing it very early. Like we kept our collective finger on the pulse of the advancements in AI. This is prior to ChatGPT, because there were tools already using GPT, which were kind of encroaching on our turf, arguably, and we wanted to test them out because we want to future-proof the agency and make the right decisions. We've basically did a massive use case testing project, got the whole team involved, scoring matrix, all the works, traffic light system, matrix. Of course, to organise it. At the end of all that, just to kind of jump forward a year, what we've done as an agency is built a bunch of bots that serve different functions within the agency. They've got different names, TOVs, personalities, but mainly they serve different functions. So there's one called Echo that helps us aggregate voice of customer data, so the research piece, and put it into tables for us. And again, that used to be manual, and it's really helped us
creating efficiencies for you as an agency. Yeah.
And obviously, I could talk about all our different bots, but from the client side, look, I think that copywriting, I don't think AI is replacing copywriting anytime soon. The art and science of it. I think that copywriters will be replaced by copywriters using AI. Yeah. Much like when my dad was a graphic designer, he used to draw logos by hand, illustrate them, and then scan them in and downsize them. Then Max came along, Adobe, and he was just slow to the uptake, really bad with technology, and he couldn't keep up and he had to pivot. Yeah. So that's why we've embraced it, and we think that's really important for copywriters to understand the strengths and limitations. The fact that there are people out there, use it in the right way, don't abuse it. Yeah. There are people out there abusing ChatGPT and AI. 100%. They just think you can put a simple prompt in and it can create all your content. The problem with that is, and someone put this perfectly as a comment on one of my LinkedIn posts. I can't remember who it was. Oops, sorry. Can't remember who it was, so I can't give them a shout out. But they said the best way to write great copy using AI is by being a great copywriter. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out.
100%.
And you're seeing that garbage everywhere. So the way that brands can rise above it is by, using agencies like us, using copywriters that know what they're doing, they know what output they're aiming to get, who are using AI in the right way. And that can be things like research, first drafts, as a sparring partner. But yeah, it has potentially affected demand a little bit. Like there was a drop at the beginning. Then, this is really interesting, we started seeing companies coming to us and asking for human copywriting.
Because they failed with AI, basically.
Yeah. They never had to qualify it in the past, like human copywriting. We never had those 2 years ago.
It was going to be my question, actually, because I think there's obviously there's all this fear around AI and it's going to take everyone's jobs away and what we all want to do for a living. Same for designers, same in creative space. But I kind of and I see that fear, obviously, and I think, yes, fair enough, it's relevant. But I think there's a part of me that thinks, well, as you said, there's so much bad copy being done now because everyone's dabbling with AI that actually I almost see that it's going to push people more towards great copywriting teams, because there's going to be so many bad examples out there of copy that's been done appallingly badly with some AI tool.
I agree. Look, what it does, it averages the web, right? ChatGPT or GPT, the LLM, has basically learned its copywriting from billions of data points out there on the web. And what it does as a predictive tool is kind of average things. It's like what's most likely to come next. That's the essence of how it works. So naturally, it's prone to cliches, right? And cliches are one of the things we avoid, and it's on the list in the 13 lenses, right? Steer clear of cliches, otherwise you sound like everyone else. And like you said, it averages the playing field. If everyone's using AI, we all sound the same. And but in the end of the day, it's always a competition. So brands need to rise above that and connect with their audience and gain share of voice, gain market share. How can they do that? By using AI in the right way, not abusing it. And hopefully by using like really good creative copywriters that have frameworks that can make their copy sort of, stronger, more powerful, and more creative and more human and more authentic than the people that are just like pressing a button.
Exactly. I love that, because we see it in the design space as well, like the cliche thing. I love that because it's exactly the same visually. If you get teams creating content internally or going onto a stock library or whatever, that's where you get the saturation of like, oh, we're going to use a cog for thinking, and we're going to use a jigsaw puzzle, and we're going to use, a lock to show security and safety, and, all those cliches, again, all the things you need to stay clear of that people go, in completely the wrong direction. My last question about AI, because again, I think we could do an hour podcast on that, is, and I love the fact you're embracing it as a tool, and I think that's exactly the right approach. How do we, and not you, how do we all, because we're all embracing AI, but particularly in relation to copy, how do we retain that authenticity piece? Like, I'm a little bit obsessed about brands being authentic. And that's always my question mark with AI is, do you think, does AI in some way remove authenticity?
Yeah. I've seen it all the time.
How do we mitigate against that?
I think you see it even like LinkedIn, as you know, we like to post on LinkedIn from time to time. Love it and hate it at the same time.
Exactly.
You're seeing that, and there's supposedly been, apparently, according to some study that I looked at recently, over 50% of content in LinkedIn is now generated by AI, and you can kind of see it in terms of the quality and the sameness, and the lack of authenticity, as you said, like it's draining that authenticity. So how do you swerve that? I would say that if you're augmenting the process with AI, I would say that, especially for something like LinkedIn or even just definitely brand messaging, the core needs to come from here and from the people. Like, even as a small example of that, I'm going to admit, I've got a bot called Linkicon, and he helps spy. He doesn't write my LinkedIn content, but he helps me spar. He helps me sometimes finish posts a bit. And if I've tried to use him and just write a post, it goes off, because that hook, that raw, authentic hook, the idea and the way you convey that idea to kind of the primal brain, the emotion, that's completely missing. But then maybe, so get your ideas down, use your brain, your creativity, your authenticity. That should, even being authentic, should help to differentiate you, because you're you, right? So you have your own ideas and ways of saying things. So then I'd say, like, use AI as a sparring partner, as a way to like go, that's not quite the right way. But maybe give me some different options to say.
Iterate,
exactly. And sometimes there'll be bits that are great, other bits that aren't. And if you want some real specifics, you can see, ChatGPT, for example, does certain things. Again, I don't know why I'm just talking about LinkedIn, but when it's writing copy, it will always use an M dash, like the long one, and you see it everywhere. So if you want to, and people are picking up on that. People are starting to understand. So if you want to seem authentic,
why is ChatGPT not learning not to use the M dash?
I don't know.
That's what I was questioning. I was like, I don't know. Surely that should be a bit of machine learning there to be like, well, I shouldn't be doing that anymore.
Well, that's the ins and outs of it. I don't know. I don't know.
It's going to happen now. They're going to disappear from January.
They've gone. To this podcast.
Thanks to this podcast. Exactly. That's it. It's gone from January. Right, we're going to move on from AI and we're going to move to wrap up. So I'm going to go full circle back to the Creative Copywriter. So your agency, you've scaled it to 19 people, I believe you are now.
In-house,
What's been the biggest challenge for you going from, well, I was going to say 1, but 2, you and your lovely wife, to 19 in that time?
Well, it was 1, and then I actually made a high. She joined a few years later. Oh gosh, biggest challenge. How long have you got? How many?
Anything that you know what
out. I mean, like, there's obviously market challenges, and like that's something where as a challenge, both in terms of actual growth and a mental challenge to like, when you think you're doing all the right things and you are doing pretty much all the right things or most of the right things, as much as you can do as humans, but then you suddenly have market challenges. COVID, for example, 2020, then the wars and the economy and the downturn over the last year and a half.
Not been the most fun year, has it?
Not fun, and it's a struggle. And you have to keep telling yourself, look, we're doing the right things. We're pushing in the right areas, and pushing while still trying to maintain your own mental health. Like, it's really, really important as a founder. So I guess that's the toughest thing, I would say. Maybe it's just because it's on the mind right now, is like wider market challenges where it's just much harder to navigate, or there's less predictability than there was previously when we kind of knew. It's always like that, as you know, but you kind of know. You can set growth targets, and if you're hitting them, you can kind of keep going in that direction. And then suddenly the last few years have been a lot
really
tougher.
Unpredictable. Yeah. So with that in mind, what next for the Creative Copywriter?
Next, we're going to conquer 2025. the market challenges are going to disappear.
We're going economy's going to fix itself. Yeah, exactly. We're going to wake up in January. The problems.
The leads are just going to be like, we're going to have the other problem when you've got too many leads and you're like, oh gosh, leave us alone.
I love that.
There's that, and we're taking what we've done with AI internally. This is the exciting thing, and we're just starting to kind of externalize that. So we're working with a client right now to build them an agent, a bot, to help remove some operational bottlenecks within the marketing and content marketing process. So really interesting space.
Bit of a pivot for you guys as well then, in terms of like getting really into the sort of strategy piece then to change a business operationally.
And we do strategy. So already research strategy in words, but like this is like thinking about bottlenecks to success. And it kind of makes sense. Like if you're doing strategy, like what are the strategy goes far beyond sort of just the output
plan,
it's like, what are the pain points? What's going to stop this succeeding? And in many cases, it is operational problems. Like in our case, working with like B2B sort of technical and engineering companies, whereby the marketers don't have the knowledge, the deep product knowledge, and the SMEs don't have time, and that's an issue. So we're looking at building bots where they can serve that knowledge up, so it can create briefs for us much more easily because it can tap into whatever content already exists. So it's very interesting territory. For us, we need to make sure it's not diluting our core essence of the brand, which is words. So we're not going to be just building bots for the entire business. Exactly. But for us, we're thinking, agents and AI bots within the content marketing space still kind of makes sense.
But that's really interesting. I mean, you really are embracing AI. Going all in. I love
it.
Listen, Konrad, I could speak to you for about 3.5 hours, and I'm sure people listening could watch you as well. But we're going to have to sadly wrap up today. I think we're going to have to do a part 2.
I'm game.
You need to come on. I know you
absolutely.
started a podcast recently.
And you need to come on ours. So there we go.
I'd love to come on too, and we'll maybe carry on the conversation in some other way. But for today, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, coming over to East London, doing this on a cold, horrible day just before Christmas.
Absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Very much appreciated. For you guys watching, if you've enjoyed today, please go and check out Konrad on LinkedIn, Konrad Sanders. If you want to learn more about the Creative Copywriter, I think the website is creative-copywriter.net. So go and check them out. And if you've liked listening today, then please follow us. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify. So yeah, please give us a follow. See you next time.